Hey everyone, Captain Steve here. Hope you guys are having a good day. You've probably seen me around on the channel a lot doing videos with Bat Chat or Primetime Crisis or just any number of random things. And in case you don't know me that well, I had the Crisis team get together and ask me a few questions. The first question is from the Curious Low, who asks what my favorite childhood cartoon is. Now this is tough because I always try to differentiate cartoons from anime, and as a kid I watched more anime than I watched cartoons. I remember being a kid growing up and watching stuff like Ronin Warriors and Gundam Wing, Yu Yu Hakusho. If we're talking strictly cartoons, then I have to go with Animaniacs. I love Animaniacs to death. I think that's one of the best shows ever made. It holds up remarkably well all of these years later. But if you're talking more broadly, and I can include anime alongside just regular US made cartoons, then the answer would easily be no contest Dragon Ball Z. I love Dragon Ball Z to death, and I don't mean the whole franchise, because it's all interesting and I like all of it to varying degrees, but Dragon Ball's fine, Dragon Ball GT isn't very good, but Dragon Ball Z, where Goku goes Super Saiyan and you see the stuff with Frieza and Cell and the Android arc and Future Trunks and all of that. Like, I love Dragon Ball Z overall. Even though the Majin Buu saga has issues, I love it to death. So I think Dragon Ball Z would ultimately be my answer if I'm allowed to count anime. Next we have a question from Manos, which is, which villain deserves their own movie? I think I would probably have to go with Deadshot. I like Deadshot a lot. I think everybody knows this by now. Deadshot's my favorite villain in all of comics. I think he's absolutely brilliant. And he's one of those characters where I feel like he works independently of having any heroes in his work. If you read the John Ostrander miniseries from the 80s that Dan and I reviewed, I think at least a year ago at this point, that story doesn't have any good guys. The story doesn't have any morally upright people at all. There's a couple of cameos from people in the Suicide Squad, but that's about it, right? That's a story where Deadshot just goes around killing people. And I mean, there's a really interesting reason behind his family and such that deals with it. But there's no, Deadshot fighting a costumed hero in that story. Part of what makes Deadshot so interesting to me is Deadshot's a character that personifies the bullet and he personifies death. He personifies the active intent to kill that makes life sacred, that life can stop at any given moment. And he's got a death wish, but his death wish comes with the ability to inspire the love of life in other people. And so it's a really fascinating psychological issue. Next question we have from Eric, who asks, aside from Bond, who's my favorite fictional spy? And bonus points for favorite actor to play the character, if applicable. This is tough as well. Everyone knows I'm a massive James Bond fan, and my favorite James Bond's always been Roger Moore. And to bridge off of that, I think my favorite fictional spy character, at least that has a franchise, because there's lots of spies in just individual movies that don't have other things they appeared in that I like. But as a franchise character, I think my favorite spy would have to be Simon Templar, the Saint. The Saint TV series is something I watched a lot as a kid. I had VHSs of it, I saw it on TV. Over the years, I've been collecting the DVDs of it. Simon Templar is a character I really like. The whole idea of a modern Robin Hood, but not really being a morally upright character. The idea that he just steals from thieves, but keeps everything to himself. It's tough to call that a spy show exactly because he doesn't work for any government agency. But the idea is kind of espionage-based, and the series has always been regarded as a spy show, even if it isn't based in any sort of government secret or espionage kind of thing. Simon Templar was played by Roger Moore for a long time. There's a movie that came much later with Val Kilmer that isn't very good. And there have been other actors to go in and out of the role. There's been talk of making a new TV series for years now. There was one point where Eliza Dushku was attached to play one of the characters, and I don't know what happened to it. There's been lots of attempts to make a pilot for that show again, and it just hasn't happened. But Simon Templar, the Saint's a character I like a lot. Now there's a question from Rasco, who's asking my favorite scene in any movie. It's a toss-up between the scene at the end of Chinatown, where you see Jake is standing there in Chinatown, and Mrs. Mulray's been shot and she's dead, and he's just like in awe of how horrible this is, and his cop buddy says, "Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown," and he pan out of the city, and it's one of the most fatalistic endings I've ever seen. It's either that, or, and maybe because I've floored more thoughts on this more coherently, it's the scene in Avengers Age of Ultron where Vision and Ultron are talking to each other in the forest before Vision kills Ultron. The depth of that scene, the ideas, the way it's shot, the way it's acted, the delivery of everything, it's absolutely magnificent. It's one of the greatest scenes I've ever seen in film, but also just with superheroes in general. Next, there's a question from Dan asking what the single best episode of television I've ever seen is. I know I just answered with Joss Whedon, and maybe I'm predictable, but I'm going to have to go with the single best episode of television I've ever seen is Angel Season 2, Episode 15, right before Epiphany. Epiphany I love on its own, but I love the Epiphany aspect of that episode more than I love the episode as a whole. I like the scene more specifically where Angel says, if nothing we do matters, then all that matters is what we do. I think that's fantastic. But the episode before that, the episode where he goes to Wolfram and Hart and he asks to go down to hell, and he takes the elevator ride, and he just arrives in the world, and he realizes the world is hell and nothing is as bad as what people do, and he's just walking around the city completely dead inside, him having this whole goal of fighting Wolfram and Hart, but at the end of the day just not coming away with anything and feeling absolutely cold. It's one of the best episodes of television ever, and probably my favorite. Next finally we have a question from Logan. What Batman character, besides Batman, do you think you're most like? This is more another predictable answer. It's Tim Drake. I love Tim Drake to death. I think Tim Drake is one of the greatest comic book characters ever created. He's my favorite Robin easily. The thing about Tim Drake is there's so much to that character that I relate to. I remember when I first moved with my family and I started high school, and the first comic I read after we moved and I started going to a new school is Robin to Kill a Bird. And what happens in that story is that Robin's gone down to Bloodhaven because he has to escape the ghosts of Gotham City, as I think Batman puts it. The whole idea being like Superboy just died, who's his best friend. Stephanie Brown just died, who was his girlfriend. His dad just died, an identity crisis from Captain Boomerang. His stepmom, I think in that series, is sick and in the hospital, and he's visiting her, and he goes to school, he doesn't have any new friends yet. He's more geeky than anyone else he knows, he's very reserved, he's more mature for his age than the people he's talking to. Like, there's just so much about that character boiled down to that one story that was me in that moment, to where I just formed a connection to that character, and I could never escape it. Even when he went on to being Red Robin, I love all of that stuff. I like this idea of him trying to constantly claim the title of Batman for himself, but not directly. Like, he doesn't want to be Batman at the expense of Bruce. He wants to be like Bruce, and doing that, he molds himself more into Batman, and he sees the dangers of it. His dad, Jack Drake, and his dad, Bruce Wayne, he's so absolutely close to, which is really similar to me and my dad. His mom being sick, or his stepmom being sick, really similar to my mom. The fact that he's always just kind of by himself, the way he speaks, the way he thinks about things, even sometimes, depending on what you read, the way he looks. I think Tim Drake is kind of just me in a comic book. I love that character. The Chuck Dixon run of that comic is one of the best comic book runs ever. Both of his costumes, his original costumes, the red and black one based on Superboy, and the green one that would kind of become the definitive Robin costume, were just great designs. And if you ever read Robin, A Hero Reborn, the Old Trade collection, there's actually a really cool diagram at the end of that series that shows like all the special gadgets and the layout of the costume itself, and it's kind of cool. So yeah, Tim Drake is easily my favorite, is the Batman character I relate to most. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you got to know me a little bit better, and thank you Crisis Team for all the fantastic questions.